Today was my absolute favorite class. Today we talked about synapses and what happens when an active potential comes down the first neuron, and then what exactly happens when it releases neurotransmitter into the synapse. So the signal goes from an all or none, fire or not fire, electrical impulse, to the space between the neurons, tiny little, like 10 billionths of a meter, and then it becomes chemical. And this is where the power of the nervous system comes in. This is why all neuroscientists get excited talking about the synapse, because so much happens at the synapse. On the second cell, the second neuron that you're sending the message to, there's something like 32 different things that can happen in terms of stimulating or inhibiting that next cell. And it's not always sending the message through stimulation that's important. So certain things that we do, like vision, happens when we baseline have cells that are always firing in response to no light. And when light comes into our eyes, all of a sudden that neuron shuts up, that neuron's quiet, and the inhibition of that neuron is what sends a message to us that there's light there and that we're perceiving the stimulus. So that second cell has all of a sudden got all this power. The neurotransmitters can come in and it can make short-term effects, long-term effects. It can make both at the same time. It can make that next cell more likely to fire. It can tell the cell to be less likely to fire. And there's also within this all different kinds of neurotransmitters that work in different ways. So you can have excitatory neurotransmitters, inhibitory neurotransmitters. You can have even gases can be neurotransmitters. So because of this, all of a sudden the power of the processing of the nervous system goes to a simple like yes or no signal, which I think we think about this all the time. What pathway do we want to activate? What do we want to strengthen? But it's so important to realize that just as powerful as what is excited is what is silent or what is inhibited, because powerful messages get sent when we don't use certain pathways in our brain and when we tell certain cells to be quiet. Same thing with parenting. If you are wanting something to be strengthened, you work on it, but actively not working on certain things is important as well, because eventually your child is going to kind of become what they practice through this really intricate steps and dance that happens of the neurons that fire versus the ones that don't fire, leading to inhibition or excitation in that next step in the pathway. Same thing for us. If you practice certain things, you will be more likely to fire that particular pathway that's linked to that in the future. So as parents, understanding how complicated it can be, but how simply and naturally we do this just as people anyway. We don't have to know every single intricate detail of what's happening. We just have to know what works, and awareness of that these things are changeable, and that when these things change, one, for example, learning and memory can have an activation of one neuron goes to the next neuron, and it could even simultaneously activate that next neuron in both a short and a long-term way. Short-term, so you can respond to whatever the stimulus is that you're supposed to remember, and long-term to enhance learning and memory so that you can have that cell more likely to remember, to actually maybe turn on the formation of new synapses or change different genes that are turned up or down in terms of how much protein they express in that next neuron. Even change the architecture of that next neuron, just based on what that first neuron tells it to do. It's just the coolest thing. It's so dynamic, has so much potential. The fact that we can adapt at any age, that there's no cutoff for it, that it's not like, oh, well, you hit age 5, now your critical period is done, or, oh, now you're 25, your brain should be done myelinating. At any point, we are still in an area, a critical period where synaptic plasticity can happen, or we can learn, we can adapt. It doesn't matter how old we are. There's no limit to how much we can remember or learn. We're not like computers with a finite amount of information that we can store. Instead, this very beautiful, complicated, intricate dance that's happening between our neurons billions and billions of times in our brain. It's just amazing. I love neuroscience. I'm so happy to get to share it with you. All right, so next time we're going to talk about that second neuron and how it knows what message to listen to. Does it listen to the strongest one? Does it listen to the most persistent one? Does it listen to an integration of all of them coming together? We'll talk about that next time. Join us every day in May for a new video.